Question is that the document be noted. I call the honourable member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to speak in relation to the Funding Regional and Local Community Infrastructure Interim Report and the dissenting comments by the member for Hinkler. And I do take up the commentary from the member for Longman that I thought was a very constructive contribution to the debate, but he couldn't resist in the last 30 seconds not to give the Nats a spray on the way through. And I think there are many positive aspects to the report, just as there are many positive aspects to the previous Regional Partnerships program. And I do fear that the government, in its desperate attempts to trash the legacy of the previous government, has shown a willingness to perhaps throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the Regional Partnerships program. And I'm not suggesting for a second that members of the committee are that way inclined, but there are some opposite who have shown perhaps a willingness during the heat of election campaign to go a little bit too far. And I hope that, as the member for Parkes indicated, now that we're 12 months into the new government, that cooler heads will prevail and there will be a real emphasis on ensuring that regional development projects and the initiatives with the support of local communities do get undertaken in the future. And I will take up the comments from the member for Hinkler, who submitted his report with a great deal of respect and reluctance. The member for Hinkler has an enormous amount of experience in regional development, and like myself, and while I'm only a newcomer to this place, the member for Hinkler is a strong believer, like myself, in the committee system and working together to achieve better outcomes for all Australians. And I know he was reluctant to submit his dissenting report, but he did so in good faith, and I believe he made some very pertinent points. And the member for Parkes himself also referred to the Regional Partnerships program, basically appealing for people to understand that let the facts speak for themselves. There was an overwhelming amount of good that came out of the Regional Partnerships program. And in my own electorate of Gippsland, without running through every project that was supported in Gippsland, I think there's some enormous good done in my community with projects like the Lifeline Gippsland with a $1.9 million centre. It received $550,000 of federal government funding. And for those who don't understand the work of Lifeline, it plays an absolutely critical service in Gippsland, counselling, information, referral to those who are contemplating suicide and that type of thing. So that particular project is very well supported in my electorate, along with the Churchill and District Community Hub, $880,000 for redevelopment of the town centre of Churchill, one of the most perhaps disadvantaged communities in my region with very high unemployment rates and in need of a major commercial centre redevelopment, and that was funded through regional partnerships, along with other projects. And one of my particular favourites, which received funding from the state Labor government as well as the regional partnerships program, was the paddle steamer Curler, which will be launched this weekend, Deputy Speaker. We've built the volunteers have built a replica of a paddle steamer, and it will be plying the Snowy River this weekend for the first time. And it's an enormous achievement by the people of Orbost, a community that's been knocked around by some particularly state government decisions in relation to resource allocation in the timber industry. And this regional partnerships funding, and it was supported by state government funding, has been incredibly important to the people of Orbost and the wider East Gippsland region in terms of promoting the tourism industry. There was an immigration wall of recognition which received $40,000 funding again in the town of Morwell, and it recognised the enormous contribution that migrants have made to the community of the Latrobe Valley over the past 120 years, and it's a fabulous project. And also refer to I note the chair of the committee is actually the member for Ballarat. I noticed that the Sovereign Hill itself in Ballarat, an outstanding regional tourism attraction, received $500,000 for its Chinese village. And it just reflects that the Regional Partnership program did fund a very diverse range of projects. It had flexibility, it was innovative, and that was one of the strengths of the program. And I note that the Funding Regional and Local Community Infrastructure report raises some of the issues that have been raised by other members in relation to the administration of regional partnerships. And I'm happy to concede that there were some negative findings in the audit and that some aspects of the administration of the program have been criticised. But I completely reject the commentary from the Minister for Regional Development, who has gone as far as claiming in this place that former ministers were corrupt. And I think the minister is developing an unsavoury reputation for this type of grubby politicking. Yesterday he defamed the character of the former mayor of Port Macquarie and claimed that he had been sacked for corruption. He's made similar allegations about ministers involved with the Regional Partnerships program. And I just think that it's an outrageous slur from a minister who can't help playing the man. And I really think he needs to take a cold shower, settle down a bit and realise that there are members on both sides of the House who actually want to get on with the job, and in particular with regional partnerships or regional development initiatives. There are people who want to get on with the job and start delivering for their communities, and the minister himself would be well advised to do that. It's taken him 12 months to finally announce some funding for regional development last week, and that was well received, I accept, throughout regional areas. But it did take 12 months, and the minister should spend more time on those positive and practical applications of his skills rather than playing the man and making false allegations of corruption without any substantiation whatsoever. It reflects poorly on him and on his side of politics. Now, the member for Hinkler, in his dissenting report, and I read the dissenting report and the interim report, and I think there's a lot of good in both of them, but there's two aspects to the reports that I wanted to concentrate on, Deputy Speaker, and that deals with the recommendations regarding the grant sizes and the approval processes, and also the recommendations which deal with the exclusion of for-profit entities from this program. I would like to start with the recommendation number 6, and I do quote from the report that the committee recommends that the new regional and local community infrastructure program exclude applications from for-profit entities. And I do note the contribution from the member for Longman in this regard, but I'm afraid we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. In a time of rising unemployment and where job opportunities, particularly in regional areas, are going to become tighter and tighter, I believe that seed funding can really make a difference to these commercial entities, and I think it's a mistake by the report by the committee in this case to recommend that the funding not be provided to for-profit entities. And it's not just my opinion; it's also one that's shared with the member for Hinkler, who I believe has demonstrated with his vast experience in regional development before entering this place his breadth of knowledge. And it's also the opinion, Deputy Speaker, of the former Regional Development Minister and now the Premier of Victoria, the Honourable John Brumby. And I'd just like to quote from a media release from the Minister when he was Minister for State and Regional Development from October 30, 2006. And it goes to say a $300,000 BRACS government grant will trigger a $21 million expansion of Paddy's Bensdale food plant, creating 100 new full-time jobs. And the Minister, who's never been one to hide his light behind a bushel, goes on to say that this expansion by Paddy's Food is a major investment for East Gippsland that will allow the company to export into other new markets, especially in the lucrative US market for its range of savoury pies, pasties and sausage rolls. And he goes on with the Regional Investment Initiative as a key part of Victorian Government's agenda to drive prosperity and growth across provincial Victoria. Now, I haven't always agreed with the Honourable Premier from Victoria, but in this case I feel I must. The Paddy's Foods, the support for that particular industry, it's one of the great companies in regional Victoria and in East Gippsland. And I must just say for the record that the former chairman of the company, Richard Rees, has been a great contributor to regional development through his involvement with a group called Champions of the Bush, which is a successful lobby organisation based in primarily in Victoria, where regional companies have invested their own money, about $10,000 each per year, to support regional development, to encourage state and federal governments to invest in regional communities. And Richard Rees, as the former chairman of the board and ongoing member of Champions of Bush, has been a great champion of regional communities. And I do accept, and I pick up some of the commentary from the member for Longman, that it is difficult for governments to pick winners, and I do accept that. That is difficult, and there have been some mistakes made in the past, and I'm sure there will be some more in the future. But as the member for Hinkler says in his comments, to exclude commercial development is a denial of the stated role of the department itself, being Regional Development Australia. And the focus on community and social infrastructure is not something that I oppose by any stretch at all, but I believe that the committee may be putting itself in a position with this recommendation that's being unnecessarily restrictive in excluding the commercial operators from applying in the future. I think providing a helping hand to existing operators or new operators to establish ventures in regional areas is a valuable use of taxpayers' resources if it's used appropriately, and I do accept the need for checks and balances, and it's a point that's been well made by members opposite. You know, just for the record, the government has had no hesitation in putting up money to bail out the car industry, about $6 billion, and I do believe it's serious about regional development. It will provide a funding stream for commercial development to access in the future, and I appreciate that the committee's report in recommendation 7 does support the establishment of a regional industry grant scheme under another department. But I believe that the actual that scheme rightfully belongs with the new Regional Development Australia, and in any case, I'm not convinced that the government is committed to providing funding in relation to recommendation 7. I believe this program would lose its local input and focus if this commercial aspect was taken out of the particular grant scheme, and I do support the opportunity for for-profit enterprises to be able to apply for funding. I also take up the committee's recommendation in relation to the process and recommendation, which is recommendation 13, regarding the sliding scale of complexity for forms and information requirements, and I think that's an excellent move to streamline the application process, and I'd actually urge the committee to consider opportunities, if it's at all possible, to go further in the future with some type of a smaller community grant scheme, a quick grant scheme, for want of a better phrase, for the not-for-profit sector. We have a problem in our smaller regional towns that if you're applying for a small amount of funding, it almost becomes too onerous to bother doing it. If your communities can raise dollar for dollar funding for projects of a figure, say, up to $20,000, they've demonstrated by their capacity to raise that sort of funding that they're committed to the project, and I would strongly advocate for a low paperwork scheme of some description, and that's the type of work you'd carry out with that type of program would be upgrading of community halls in small country towns, upgrading playgrounds or establishing new playgrounds which have a regional tourism focus in themselves, and improving sporting facilities. And I accept that you'll need to maintain the accountability factors to go with it, but I think we need to actually start trusting some of our local communities a lot more. And the local community groups, the not-for-profit groups, if they've had the capacity to raise $5,000 or $10,000 themselves, and it's a worthwhile community project, I think we can develop a quick grant type of scheme to assist those groups to undertake that type of work. I'll just make one point, though, in relation to improving sporting facilities, and this links into other discussions about excessive use of alcohol and responsible serving of alcohol. We have a major problem in country communities where the only avenue for some of our country sporting clubs is to sell alcohol. It's the only avenue for them to raise funds, and we can preach to them as much as we like about the responsible serving of alcohol and encouraging younger people to pursue healthy lifestyles, but unless we're prepared to put some money in there to help these footy clubs, netball clubs, cricket clubs, the way they make their money is over the bar, and we're going to need to support them in the future. And I think this grants program is one opportunity to do that and really support these small local communities. The approvals process, I do believe that we need to make sure we have a focus on developing local solutions to these local problems. And I take up the member for Hinkler's views again on support for local development boards, and I think it's been echoed by the member for Parks, and also the member for Lindsay in his commentary about the success of the Roads to Recovery program. And one of the great successes of that program is the local buy-in, that we've trusted local people to understand their own local area, to develop their own practical solutions, their own common sense, to set their own priorities in their communities. And the Roads to Recovery model is a very good model for us, particularly when we're looking at these smaller infrastructure projects, and I do believe there's opportunities to involve local government more in that regard. And I encourage the Minister in his decisions last week with the $300 million program to involve local government directly in that program. My only criticism perhaps is that it needs to go on 2, 3, 4 years in the future to give these councils some surety of investment, or some surety that funding is on the way. The backlog of projects is always going to be there. I mean, you can invest as much as you like in regional infrastructure. There's always another project waiting around the corner, and I think it's something that the Minister made a good decision in relation to that $300 million project. I know it was well received in my community, and the only hesitation is that we'd like to see some surety of investment going forward. And just in terms of the local input and ensuring that the local communities are engaged in the process, once you get your local communities involved in setting the priorities and achieving the funding, you'll find that the local communities will actually leverage off the available funding and turn $10 into $100 very quickly. They're very good in small country communities where one bloke will have a truck and the other bloke will know someone with a bobcat whose cousin is a painter, whose mate will put the whole playground up for a slab of VB. That's the type of leveraging you'll get out of country communities. They'll put a lot of in-kind community work in for you and use their resources for the benefit of their community once you've engaged them and ensured they had some control of how the funding was allocated. In closing, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that the Regional Partnerships program did an enormous amount of good for country areas, and I'd also like to put on my record the support for the Area Consultative Committee, particularly in Gippsland, where the staff and the committee and the staff and the board members, I think, have been unfortunately caught up in this whole debate. And I join the member for Hinkler in raising some serious reservations about this report and urge the government to abandon the politics completely and just get on with the job at hand. And in saying that, I'm not seeking at all to reflect negatively on any of the individual committee members at all. I believe they've been put in a bit of a difficult situation where the heat of election campaign has flowed into a report, and now we really want to get about the job of doing some good for regional areas. I commend the committee at many levels for the work they've done with their interim report, and as I said at the outset, there are many positive recommendations in that report, but as an interim report there's always room for improvement. I urge the members to have the courage to possibly take risks in their final report and support the potential growth in regional communities. And I also join with the member for Parks in calling on members on all sides to ignore some of the rantings and the ravings we've been seeing by the Minister in relation to this and focus on the important job at hand. And I believe the committee will focus on the important job at hand. I believe they will ignore the Minister because he's actually going through the process of discrediting himself with some of the ranting and raving who's been going on in Parliament of late. I wish the committee well with their deliberations, and I look forward to supporting them in their efforts to invest in the future of regional communities.